not a modder myself, but we've got a great panel here of modders. We've got a lot of great things to talk about on this topic. The topic is celebrating the history of modding. And as I'm sure most of you are aware, modding is very integral to the entire history of it. Right down its core DNA. It's basically a company formed by ex-Office employees who learned to basically hack modding brothers and put it on computers, thanks to our maximization of streaming technology. And that later became Commander Keen, and that became the start of all this and why you're here. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to each of the panelists and have them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about why you are, or what your history is with modding and some background in your career, starting with Jonathan Wright here.
All right, I guess this is working. I'm Jonathan Wright. I'm currently lead on an unannounced project at ID. I've been there, I'm in my 9th year at ID. Originally, I got my start in the industry doing Quake mods. If you've been around a while, played Quake 1, I did the Zeus bot and the Cujo bot and several other things. Sometimes I can go back and play on a Quake 1 server and see some of my mods integrated there, so that's kind of cool. I started at Iron Storm on a well-known project there at Daikatana. Later, quit with 8 other guys one day to form a company called Third Law, and we did the Kiss Psycho Circus and some other stuff. That's kind of my history. I was lead AI and animation programmer for Rage before starting this new project. So, you know, modding got me into the industry. There's no question about that. And I think it's you know, something we want to focus on in the future. It's very important to ID. We still have a lot of guys, a lot of the senior guys there at ID now got their start doing it. So it's dear to my heart, and I'm just glad I can be on this panel.
GP.
Hi, I'm GP Leverton. Right now I'm working at Double Fine Productions on Ron Gilbert's project, The Cave. I started off many years ago as a little kid making Wolfenstein 3D maps, and then later, of course, Doom maps, and then Quake and Half-Life. And then I got a job in the game industry in 2000, kind of on the basis of some of the Half-Life mapping work that I had done. And yeah, since then, like I worked at Irrational from 2005 to 2007, worked on BioShock, and then at 2K Marin on BioShock 2. But yeah, like a lot of people, mods were definitely how I learned to first start tinkering with games, how to, you know, figure out how to implement ideas within constraints, you know, and so mods were both great. They were both what got me passionate about and interested in game development, but also, you know, they also taught me the ropes and, you know, how to work with the technology and work within constraints, which I think is a big part of what modding is great about modding. So yeah, it's my thing.
Hey, I'm Brendan Chung. Yeah, so I got my start doing modding also like these guys, doing stuff like Wolf 3D, Doom, Quake. A number of years doing that led to working in AAA at Pandemic Studios. So after about 5 years working there, the studio eventually got shut down, and I decided to start my own little independent company called Blendo Games. So in a way, I kind of returned back to doing my small little independent stuff, my little mod work. Because I had two games I've made so far have been based on the Quake 2 engine. And yeah, definitely modding has, like these guys, they're telling me a lot about the practicalities of making games and talking about how to realistically make things yourself.
The follow-up question for all of you I have is actually how important was modding in the genesis of your career? How did that open doors for you? How did that get you where you are? If you could all talk about that, actually just start for you, Brendan. How important was modding as far as opening doors in your career?
Yeah. I mean, modding, it definitely teaches you how to make things within limitations. I mean, that's basically all what game development is largely about. It's about, you know, you don't have unlimited resources, unless certain companies do, I guess. But generally speaking, you have to work something within a very narrow constraints. But you have to make the most of those constraints and modding, you have to really push the engine to do things which you, oftentimes what it's not supposed to do. Like when I was working on Pandemic, the designers, the programmers really, some of them really disliked me because I would do wacky stuff with the scripting system that you're really not supposed to do with it. It was like, what are you doing with this system? It's like, I made a spawning system that spawns monsters randomly. It's like, that's wrong. But it was cool. And that's what I learned from modding.
Based on your history, then you ended up with a lot of, when we talk about some of the projects you've done since then, Adam Zombie Smash and Barista, any of the things that you've created. You can't hear me very well. Do you want to talk about some of your projects that you're sort of famous for, Barista, Adam Zombie Smash, or the things that you've created in your career that have arisen from modding?
Yeah, so I mean, two of my games I made, Adam Zombie Smasher and Flotilla, which are, completely not based on first-person shooters at all, like in tech. But what's cool about making mods is that just from making mods, it forces you to push your constraints so far that it ends up kind of bleeding into all your other genres that you make. Like Adam Zombie Smasher is an RTS game. But even though it's an RTS, you learn so much from all your struggles of making first-person shooters and trying to make a certain script sequence or trying to make a certain set piece that ends up making all of your other work a lot stronger.
How about you? Do you have some projects you want to talk about that you've been working on? How modding has led you into those?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, modding, as far as helping me get my career started and stuff, it absolutely did. Like I think I can credit modding more or less entirely with how I got my start in the industry. And the really cool thing that happened in the mid to late '90s was that games releasing their tools. Like Doom, then Quake, then Half-Life, Quake 2, Quake 3, all that stuff. It's for the first time you were able to use a lot of, you were pretty much able to, you were able to use the exact same tools that the professionals were using to make stuff, but you were just one guy, in a basement or in your dorm room or something. And that was really remarkable because it sort of leveled the playing. It didn't level the playing field so much, as it just democratized it, and made it so that anybody could potentially pick up these tools, and if they were determined and talented, then they could make something really cool. So yeah, and that's really like all the mod work that I did. Like I did a map or two for Half-Life, and then I did a thing that I never released, but it was intended to be like this vertical slice kind of thing for this big dream, for this overambitious, what I thought a cool game would be in college. But I made enough of a slice of it that it was a good portfolio piece, and that portfolio piece is what got me my first job in the industry at Human Head Studios in 2000. So yeah, like, and if those companies hadn't released, if id and Valve hadn't released their tools and just said, hey, go nuts, make whatever you can dream up with this stuff. I don't really know how I would have. I guess I could have gone to a university program and gotten to mess with some of the tools then. But there's no comparison between that and just being able to just mess with it on your own time and treat it like any other labor of love, like painting or writing or playing an instrument or something. So that was wonderful, and I feel incredibly fortunate that I came up at a time when that was happening and all that. And then I made Doom maps and Quake maps and stuff way back in the day, and they were all completely terrible. And then I kind of left that aside because I had all this professional game development stuff to do, like BioShock and all that. As we were shipping BioShock 2, though, I suddenly had some free time again, and so I made a demake of the level that I worked on in BioShock 1 in the Doom 2 engine, which the level that I worked on in BioShock was called Arcadia. And so I made a demake of that in the Doom engine, which is just like a relatively faithful recreation of it, in the Doom 2 engine. And I did things like using monster teleport triggers to make the teleporting enemies that are in BioShock, to like crudely approximate all these things, but as like a stock vanilla Doom 2 sort of thing. And it, so that was well received. And as far as other projects, I have a whole bunch of other Doom projects that are kind of at various stages of completion, but I don't want to talk about any of that if they never come to light. And I used the Quake 3 engine, actually, the open source version of the Quake 3 engine as the basis for the game that I submitted to the IGF in 2008, which I didn't turn into like a big retail release game or anything like that, but it was really cool because I got the indie game experience, submitted it to the IGF, and I was really proud of it. And Quake 3 ended up being a really good choice for how to work with that because it was similar enough to Quake 3, but did some different stuff. And good tools like very simple but easy to extend code. So yeah, like those. And I think that's something that id engines were the first engines to really put themselves out there as being like, yes, you can mess with this code or this content. And I still think that that's a virtue, of any engine or piece or tools that you can use nowadays for game development. Is just how easy is it to start hacking around with it, messing with stuff. Because everybody is just a kid in a basement at one point or another messing with stuff, and helping people bootstrap upward is a really good thing.
And Jonathan, id and both Armstrong were very famous for hiring out of the early mod communities. A lot of big names came out of that. How did you get your start? With these guys.
I'd already been programming for 15 years by the time I started messing with Quake stuff. And probably get some people can't know how old I am. I've gone Full Sail and Guildhall. These places didn't exist when I was going to college. And so I went to college for computer science and bored me to death because they weren't teaching me anything I didn't know, and I just wanted to make video games. So, eventually Quake comes out, and the great thing for me was Quake C. So I just took off with that. For some reason, some guy had made a bot that could just play with you, but to me it was like, I'm going to make one of these that I can deathmatch with. And so I just kind of took off with the Zeus bot, and it was probably, I guess it was one of the earliest deathmatch bots. I mean, it was right about the same time as the Reaper bot came out, which was obviously more famous than Stephen Bolt did, and who's at Epic now. But I did that, and I did the Cujo bot, which was a dog that played with you, and several other things. But I was working landscaping, and then I get a phone call one night, and it's John Romero, and I was like, whoa! And he's like, we need an AI programmer. We want you to come. How would you feel about that? And I was like, I'm packing the truck now. And so I just put everything I had in my truck and drove to Dallas from North Carolina. So there's no question that, that modding got me into the industry. I mean, I had no visibility otherwise. I think I had, a lot of the skills that were required already because I've been programming so long, but, without modding, Romero never would have seen my work. Before that, I had done some Wolfenstein maps with this little grid editor, and I some of my Doom 2 maps and Doom maps are still on the internet, but probably nobody's ever played them, but they're there in the archives. So there's no question that modding was a big deal to me. It was the first really. I guess we could say that. To start with, it was the community that made modding happen. I mean, the Wolfenstein editor I remember was literally some guy wrote it that had nothing to do with it. The Doom editors, I think the first ones that were released were actually user ones. And then, it kind of realized what was happening there and made it easier and easier to mod the games. Eventually ending up with Quake, which Quake was a great game all around. It's probably my favorite game ever. I played Doom for 3 years straight, a couple hours a day. I mean, I calculated hours on that one time. It was ridiculous. So I stopped playing and started doing work. But, it realized what was happening with this and continued to make it easier and easier to make mods with Quake being, the greatest innovation with Quake C. And the ability to not only make maps but change your code. That's what makes it a tradition. I mean, I think possibly we lost a little bit of that momentum with the last project, but that's something that I think we can change.
Just just get a sense of how far the industry's come since then. Could you imagine anyone being hired as a level designer right now without a portfolio and modding of some kind?
I can,
Okay.
but generally, like, we get kind of two things now. We get the people who, well, three things, I guess. There's people that have worked at other companies, obviously, and have that experience, but then there's people who have gone to school for it, and they have a kind of a portfolio. I wouldn't call it a modding portfolio as much as, you know, what they did while they were at one of the special schools. And then, of course, there's the modders. I kind of look at the two equally. I mean, for me, and with my history, seeing something that somebody's done, especially when that effort was, you know, it's obvious they put a lot of effort into it themselves, that's huge for me. Because you know the person who, on the outside, has that sort of drive to get things done, wants to make games, and you know, can do it in the industry too. So for me, top of the list is always that extra work that you can show that you know, you initiated yourself.
I want to change gears just a little bit and follow up on something you started talking about, JP, and that was what tools you use. I want to actually ask all of you, what tools do you use and what's important for you in a modding tools set, and what would you like to see, I guess, in modding tools going forward? Let's start with you, Brendan, if you can hear me.
Yeah, I mean, what's cool is that the tech software, the tools are pretty easy to use. The current project I'm working on is the Doom 3 engine. What's really cool about that is that the engine is really made for just making stuff really quickly. Iteration time is fantastic. There's lots of in-game editing, things like that. What's cool about the older engines, like the Doom 1 engines, is that you can make things so unbelievably fast. You know, it's literally just like connect the dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you have a room and you're ready to go. That's something that I kind of miss when I use these kind of, some of the newer engines nowadays, is that unbelievably fast iteration time that I think games really, really need.
What about you, JP?
Yeah, you know, with your tools are going to be driven in large part by your choice of engine, you know, in any kind of modding situation. But yeah, like one of the things that I use, actually, yeah, can we get this image up here? Yeah, this is a screenshot of, it's what I use, it's the editor that I used to, it's called Slade, and it's a modern Doom editor. It's Slade and Doom Builder 2 are kind of the two big modern Doom editors that you see people using to make Doom maps in this day and age, which people still are, by the way. You know, doomworld.com and those kinds of places cover new things that people make. So yeah, people are still modding classic Doom, and it's great. And so yeah, like a modern editor that has, like, you know, an OpenGL accelerated viewport, and you can like scroll around it and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of what you would expect of a modern level editor, like Unreal Ed, you know, like the latest version of Unreal Ed you would get. But yeah, and specifically because Doom, the classic Doom, is so low fidelity, you know, your drawing sectors, everything about a map can be represented in a top-down viewport. That's actually really cool because, like you were saying, Brendan, is that like, you know, you're kind of limited to not making something super hyper detailed. That's something that derails a lot of otherwise very good mod work. Is that, you know, if you're trying to compete with a AAA game that spends millions of dollars on its production stuff, you know, you can just go crazy adding infinite detail to objects that you make. Whereas in something like the Doom engine, you know, you've got these chunky little sprites, and you've got sectors, which are what you make your 3D geometry out of. And even then, you're super limited because you can't do floors upon floors. So you just have to be really smart about how you're making stuff. And it's definitely not going to stand out here. I'm skipping past a few different things here, but yeah, like, you know, but people still, like, back in the day and more recently, like, these are a few screenshots from randomly selected, like, user-made Doom mods and stuff. But people still, you know, if they're determined to make something interesting, you know, like this kind of takes like a little sector trick to make a volleyball net in a Doom thing. Somebody made like a little Super Nintendo game console that hooked up to a TV in, I think this might be from Vanguard. And yeah, people, you know, you can use sectors to do this kind of vector art, like doodling with stuff. And then, you know, you've got all your traditional like Doom actors and Doom textures and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a really good example of, yeah, again, it's that creativity within constraints thing. And it's preventing you from trying to make a really super detailed kind of, you know, like, you know, all the stuff that people do with mods for modern games. You know, like if you guys release the tools for Rage or something, then I'm sure that like, you know, people will get it. I there's still a whole lot of value in being able to mod a modern game at a high level with a super high level of fidelity, because those end up being portfolio pieces for like artists and stuff. You know, you can say like, look, here's a really nice weapon I made, here's a creature, here's some environment art. That's still a really great thing, you know. But it's a really different kind of thing from like this sort of, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, I accidentally skipped to this thing. This is the map that I made in my high school way back in the day. It's super terrible. Like I made it, you know, back in the day, in Doom's heyday. I guess that means I'm an old fogey. But yeah, and if I had made this map a few short years later, I probably would have been institutionalized or something because, yeah. But yeah, so yeah, you can cut the image.
I made one at my local library when I was young, so don't get too big.
Yeah. And I think that's like, you know, it's all about humble beginnings, you know, because people start off just making their house or their school or something like that. And then that gives you a taste of like, oh yeah, well what if, okay, now I'm gonna make something up. I'm gonna try to tell a cool little story with it, or, you know, just do something interesting or weird. And that's kind of what it's all about, so.
One of the things your answer kind of skirted around a bit there is you were talking about the AAA community. We were talking about this a bit earlier before the panel as well, and how hard it is now for modders to sort of keep up with AAA games. And there was sort of an impression that at one point it kind of maybe stalled the mod community a bit. Where do you guys see the state of the mod community right now? And can you see ways for the community to overcome those challenges and to make games that visually look closer to what we're used to seeing in AAA games now?
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest things that happened that led to one of the biggest reasons that there aren't nearly as many people making mods nowadays is not a bad reason at all, actually. It's tools like Unity and the Unreal Development Kit and stuff like that coming out that just make it so that people can make a game from scratch. You know, in the independent games movement, you know, like, and even like 2D tools like Flash and Game Maker and things like that, you know. And that's been wonderful, actually, because yeah, like you used XNA for Atom Zombie Smasher, right? So those are all wonderful things because they let people make a game from the ground up. I think what modding gets you, and the reason that modding is still valuable potentially, is that it gives you're starting from a finished game. You know, you have like a finished game full of content and all this, you know, nice stuff, and then like that just becomes like a big prop warehouse that you can use to put stuff together, and you know, or even just, you know, in a lot of cases just making small modifications to an existing thing. You know, like the bots, all like Quake led to this incredible explosion of really cool Quake mods that, you know, kind of since hasn't been seen since. And yeah, I think so I think that's a big reason that modding is still valuable to me, is that and why I'd like to see it continue to be supported by companies. You know, it's always a tough thing releasing your tools because it's like you're shipping a whole other product, albeit one with a smaller audience. And in some cases, you know, you have to worry about like legal things, like if people mod games to become pornographic or something, you might have to deal with the legal repercussions of that, and that's really unfortunate because it's you know, a lot of times companies do want to release their tools and see what people make with it, and yeah.
I was going to say, I think the key to modding and making something, you know, that can exist with a AAA title is to limit your scope. You know, it's the same reason people can go make iPhone games now, and one or two guys can make a pretty cool iPhone game. The scope on those is relatively limited compared to the AAA title. But if you're starting with a AAA title, then like he said, you have this huge prop warehouse. You know, if you limit your scope and you're not trying to redo the whole thing, you can make something really cool because you're reusing the assets you already have. So when you're thinking about making a mod, you know, think about what the scope of that is, and you know, how you can maximize the assets that are already given to you.
Brendan, do you agree with the idea that there are less people making mods right now, and if so, do you think there's certain things that can be done to help boost that once again?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel that, especially with like more modern stuff, is that when people make mods, they feel compelled to compete with AAA games. They feel compelled to meet that same standard of specular mapped, public mapped AK-47 rifles. That's why you have these websites, tons of weapon vendors, but they never end up making a mod because it takes 10 years to make, you know, one weapon asset. So I think it's cool that when you see mods out there that, you know, that instead of diving in and trying to compete directly with AAA games, they go to the unpopulated waters. They try to make stuff that doesn't exist yet. In the Skyrim workshop, it has really crazy weird stuff in there. They have that thing where, they gave top hats to crabs. That's what I want to see more of. They have a thing where, you have this magic spell that just like grows flowers. I want to grow flowers everywhere.
Yeah, that's Nick's mod, right? Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
I think record of Bethesda. Totally. Yeah, I think more and more of the weird stuff, and that's something that I really loved about the Doom and Quake mod scenes back in the day, is that because, the barriers to entry were low, and that's actually a really, really good thing, because it means that anybody with an interesting idea can get in there and, put in some hard work and learn some stuff, but they'll be able to make something weird happen. I think that's kind of, that ferment of creativity has transferred over to the independent games movement a little bit now, but there's really no reason that it couldn't exist and doesn't still exist in a lot of ways in the mods community now. So yeah, if you're listening out there, people who make mods, do more weird stuff, like, modern military mods or realism mods or stuff like that. That's cool, but also make some weird stuff, or even just slightly different stuff. Like DayZ, obviously, that's the current hot thing. That's catching fire. It's a mod for Arma 2, and that is kind of like they had to really pursue some different design choices there. Like I don't know if DayZ would work as a mass market, as a big game that you could put on shelves and expect to sell millions of copies. Maybe it would. It's gotten phenomenally popular. But that's just an example of like somebody doing something really different and like, oh yeah, this game is really harsh and you die a lot, but it's got this incredible sense of dread surrounding it because it's this zombie-infested world, and yeah, it's just really cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, if you make something that you feel will only appeal to like one person in the entire world, rest assured that that one person quickly balloons up to like a really impressive number if you just give it a shot.
One of, I think, the most impressive things here at Quakecon is just to walk around the BYOC room and see the number of mods, the number of indie games being played. I think it's sort of led to the resurgence of PC gaming in the last 2 years. That one is probably the indie scene, but also the barriers to entry and the fact that people can actually make some money on some of these things right now by getting them out there relatively cheaply. With that happening, with PC gaming kind of coming back because of that, are there still further barriers you think that need to be smashed going forward for modders or for indie developers?
I think the distribution question, is a little is one that we're getting better with continually over time. Is it the Steam Workshop? Is that what it's called? Where you can distribute mods for, I think, Skyrim and stuff. I would love to see the Steam Workshop support classic Doom mods, because if you look at Doom World and a few other places that cover like new classic Doom mod releases, like these are mods, and they might have a potential audience of like a few hundred people, but even that, like if they had a good, if people could distribute those kinds of things through Steam, and just like, I don't know, build that up as a way for people to get their work out there a little better, because it's cool that there are websites out there, but the discoverability you get from something that's a little bit more like a marketplace like Steam, ModDB, and there's a lot of services and portals like that. So yeah, I feel like those things are already happening. Like all those cool things that modders need to do to get their work out there really do exist today and are getting more and more prevalent and well connected with the way that people are making and learning about and playing stuff. So yeah, it's a great it's a great time to be an indie, and it's a great time to to be a modder who's just making something for the love of it, and maybe that will turn into something, maybe it'll turn into a money-making opportunity, maybe it won't, like just doing something for a hobby is pretty awesome too, and it often does lead to some success, the world is full of people, doing something for a hobby and then getting good enough at it or getting enough fans that they can quit their job, their day job or something, and that's really awesome, and yeah, modding was, back in the day was kind of the start of that.
Yeah, in the panel yesterday, they mentioned that some of the people making like TF2 hats and weapons, that's what they do like for a living now, which blows my mind.
Do you think games like DayZ, which have been doing phenomenally, do they still have sort of a discovery problem with the mainstream gamer? Is there something more that can be done to help things like that get out there better?
It seems like, I guess probably most of the people who are playing DayZ right now found out about it through a gaming news site, you know? Like they went on Rock, Paper, Shotgun or something and was, you know, or they just heard their friends going crazy for it and they decided to download it and install it. And yeah, like the process of downloading it and installing it for some mods, you know, like that's something where if your engine is really set up from day one to work well with modding, then it becomes really easy for, you know, like Valve's made it really easy to, you know, in all the old id games, it's very easy to just, you download a thing, you unzip it, or you just click the installer and boom, you're in there and playing it. And maybe, yeah, so actually, you know, on the technology side, there probably are some ways that you can just streamline that so like, it's one click from, yes, this sounds cool, I want to play this, into, okay, now I'm playing it. So, yeah.
Without wanting to get too far off topic here, this being a PC-centric conference, but Brendan and I talked a bit backstage about consoles, and is there an issue now where consoles need to catch up as far as enabling modders and indie developers, and what can they do in the future with next generation kind of looming around the corner?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough problem. Something we've seen with things like DayZ, I mean, DayZ made Arma 2 basically the #1 seller on Steam right now, which is insane. But, you know, consoles kind of need this outlet. And you know, the desire is there, because you see things like on Trials HD or Little Big Planet. I mean, people are making really crazy, weird stuff. But for some reason, that hasn't really come on as much as that. Because I guess, you know, they don't really have the console keyboard, they don't have the same development environment that PCs have. But maybe for the next console system, maybe they can, I don't know, make some changes to accommodate that better.
There's kind of competition here between a closed platform that the console manufacturers want to maintain and, you know, maintain a simple user experience, but are there things they can do within that ecosystem, you think, that can still encourage more mod behavior, more creativity from indie developers?
I would guess no, actually. I think the big three console makers, you know, they have a certification process and a licensing process and all of that stuff. That's part of their business model. So I don't think they have very much incentive to lower the barriers to entry, you know, and that we've seen that with some of the struggles that you know, small indie teams, you know, have had, like 1 or 2 people trying to get a game published on Xbox Live Arcade or PSN or something. I really do hope it changes. I think in order to fix that problem of distribution and just ease of distribution and discoverability, they would need to make some changes that would hurt their bottom line. And I hope they do that, because ultimately that will make them more relevant into the future, you know. But I think for now, because the PC doesn't have all of that, and obviously also the PC has the advantage of you're creating and consuming on the same platform, whereas you pretty much categorically can't have that with mobile stuff and with consoles. So yeah, like the PC it's unsurprisingly where it's at, and it's where it's always been at. And so yeah, that's always why it's been, one reason it's been, PC gaming has been near my heart.
Looking forward to the future then, with a thriving indie community on PC and things like the Wii console being announced, do you think traditional consoles are going to get left behind or have some catching up to do? Any predictions for the future as far as what next gen is going to hold versus consoles versus PCs?
I don't. Consoles have some really difficult. The existing console market has some big challenges ahead, and it's sort of the burden of proof is on them to continue, you know, to prove that, you know, that's going to continue to be the place where. And I think it'll still be for many years, like just sort of the place where these big, you know, mass market releases come out that everybody knows about, like Call of Duty and, you know, Madden and things like that. But yeah, like I don't know, it's not where I'm personally interested, but I'm also like a PC game nerd, like play a bunch of indie games kind of guy. So, you know, I can't really say that what I'm interested in is the way the market's going. But yeah, like I do think that there's going to continue to be really interesting stuff coming out of the woodwork on PC, and that's just going to draw in more people who wouldn't otherwise be interested. You know, like Arma 2 was a game that, yeah, I played a little bit of it when it came out, and it's definitely cool. But like DayZ is sort of more my thing than Arma 2 is, and that's wonderful because you're basically broadening the appeal of what was once a single thing. You know, and so yeah, I think yeah, consoles have a pretty cloudy future if they don't react and do something exciting and disruptive, because there's a lot of other people. You know, like if Valve releases a console, you know, anything like that, you know, yeah, it's interesting times. You know, nobody really knows how it's going to turn out.
I think the consoles are going to continue to be dominant for quite a while, just because the ease of use on the console platforms is just far ahead of what you can get on the PC. I mean, you know, we all know about driver issues and the problems those cause, and that just doesn't happen on the 360 and PS3, for instance. You pretty much know what you're getting in for. That's just extremely difficult for us to overcome on the PC. But the PC still offers us, you know, things that we can't get on the consoles. You know, Xbox, you know, Microsoft and Sony, they're part of their consideration is security. They can't have people able to inject code, you know, DLLs or whatever into AAA applications and do things that they aren't supposed to do. There's just a lot to overcome there on the modding side, I think, on consoles, and the PC is going to continue to be the place to do that.
It sounds like what you're describing, sort of unsurprisingly, is sort of a divergent path where you're looking more at AAA development going to the console side, but the PC will still have that as well, but you have more experimentation, more...
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know of anybody really who develops just on the consoles, right? You know, we all run day-to-day on the PC. We need to run more on the consoles, you know, because it's easy to just, yeah, it'll work, kind of thing. But, you know, for easy development as a developer, even, you want to run on the PC. So the PC is going to continue to be there, and things like Diablo 3 have shown that you can still sell a lot of copies of something on the PC. So that's not really a worry, but yeah, there's just two different markets, and I think they both have their places.
I want to ask you a little bit more, just again, looking to the future about what it plans to do to support the mod community in the future, without trying to get you to reveal anything you don't need to talk about. But I think there's a lot of questions about that, and people are...
Yeah, so I would say, you know, going back in history as to the way we developed Rage, you know, it was its first in-house developed console title. Before that, it had always been farmed out after the fact from PC to be developed. But the fact of the matter is the PC market is, you know, a fraction of the sales that you can get from the console markets. So it wasn't that we decided to, you know, drop the PC. We still all love the PC, and we developed on the PC, and we ran every day on the PC. But you know, there was definitely a focus for the console market too, because what we wanted with Rage was to have a, you know, an executable, well, not executable, but basically the same code base essentially across all platforms. And we did achieve that, and the same data set. But in the end, we have to also make some sacrifices for that too. So, you know, we can only fit so much on you know, 2 DVDs for the Xbox, and we're talking about gigabytes of data that you know, that we have to render, and that we'd have to do that separately for the PC. You'd be talking to up-res everything in Rage. You'd be talking about terabyte download or more. So, you know, we basically did have to kind of normalize that across in order to develop all that in-house. I mean, that's a big deal to be able to get you know, one game running across three platforms and do it every day without fail. It just works on all 3 of them. In that respect, I think, you know, looking at what the market, how the market was, and then what the share of PC was, the idea that we would need to be able, you know, to enable modding or enable modders just kind of got lost in the noise, kind of thing. There's actually recently been discussions internally about, you know, putting more focus on modding. I can't say what all that's going to be, but you know, from my standpoint, I'm definitely interested in it. I was kind of the impetus of the discussions anyway, and I think there's a lot we can do. I think it would be awesome to ship the next product and on day one, like, have mods available, and have an excellent path for people to go through to download mods. You know, whether or not that ends up happening on the next generation or not, I think is kind of irrelevant. I'll do it and push for it just to see it on the PC.
I want to leave some time for questions, but I think before we close off the questions I have, because there's a lot of interest here at Quakecon in modding community in general, what advice would you guys have for A, aspiring modders, or B, existing modders, and sort of what they should be focusing on in the future? Let's start with you, Brendan.
Make something that you know you can finish. I think a lot of us, you spend like time like writing design documents or making preview screenshots of the websites. The fact is, no one really cares about that stuff. What they want is their happy thumbs playing the game that you made. So just make the actual game.
Yeah, I guess pick a game, if you're going to make mods or something, especially levels, for instance, pick a game that you enjoy playing more than others, and like even a game that doesn't have, even a game with worse tools that you enjoy more, like mod that instead of just the big middle of the road thing. I don't even know what the most modded game nowadays would really be. Probably, I don't know, Team Fortress 2 or something. Yeah, but yeah, because if you have to enjoy playing what you're making to be able to stick it out and make a really nice, you know, level or something like that. So just, yeah, pick a game that you're passionate about already, because that passion is what will drive you through all of the painful process of, like, you know, completing that thing and all that. And yeah, I echo what Brendan said, because yeah, like, knowing your limitations and knowing what you can realistically finish, and know that you'll probably always overestimate the amount of, well, you probably underestimate the amount of work that anything is. You know, you can say like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make like 5 different levels and they'll all be connected and it'll have all this stuff going on. It's like, no, pick something small to start with, you know, and that's why my house, my school, whatever, is not a, you know, it's not a terrible place to start. Well, it is actually a terrible place to start for other reasons, because real world architecture very rarely makes for good level design. But anyway, pick something small and humble and just have fun, and, you know, like, don't be afraid to try something weird, don't be afraid to fail, you know, and start over or something. But yeah, get to that point where you've shipped something and you can release it and show it to people. Like, show your works in progress too. You know, there's a lot of good creative communities out there where you can post works in progress, get feedback from other people who are doing the same kind of thing, and that's wonderful, you know, because that's another amazing aspect of modding, is the community of just good, humble, smart people that, you know, are doing what you're doing. So yeah.
Yeah, I would echo kind of what they said. Go back to what I said with limiting scope. But, you know, if you have 15 guys, they're all going to go to make a mod, you can make a bigger mod. But if you and a buddy or just you know, you really got to consider what you can get done. And I think people often underestimate the value of finishing something. If you bring a finished mod, you know, to your interview to get in the game industry, that's going to be more impressive than, you know, a couple half-finished maps. Even if there's 15 of them versus 2. So take a realistic assessment of what you can do, and definitely do it in something you love, and do what you love. I mean, if you have an idea and you're sold on that idea, do that idea. But just consider, you know, I don't want to say consider ways to make it worse when I say, you know, take shortcuts. But what you want to do is you want to plan in a way that you're not taking on more than is humanly possible. Often people will just come up with a grand plan and never consider, you know, the bigger picture of how much work that's going to be. Often you can take the initial plan and just kind of cut it in half and still have everything you want in there, but just less assets and less work to do there.
With that, I'd like to turn it over to you guys if there's any questions from the audience. Anybody? Okay.
How come there are so few mods and skins in Quake 4? And are you going to put out a Quake 5 along those lines?
Question for those of you on the internet is why are there so few mods and skins for Quake 4? Will there be a Quake 5 version, correct?
I can't really answer the Quake 5 question, even if I knew. And really, I can't answer the Quake 4 one, because that was a kind of an externally developed project by Raven. That we did have some programming and design work, you know, to finish that off. I did, but in general, it was done out of house, and it's kind of been under Activision's thumb, I think, until recently even. So I can't really give you a good answer to that.
Any other questions?
At this point, would it actually be better to create maps on older games like Doom and Quake, or to actually work with more current games like Skyrim or TF2 or other games like that?
The question, if you correct me if I'm wrong, I had a little bit of trouble hearing you, was at this point, would it be better to work with older games, creating maps for older games, or would...
Or
be better working with more current games like Skyrim or modding?
I think that would probably depend on what your objective is. If you want to get a job at a AAA game development studio, you know, and you want to work on a team with like 50 or 100 other people on like some, you know, on a big game like Rage or Dishonored or something, then I would say mod a more recent game like Skyrim or any of the Valve games or something like that. If you just want to make something weird, or you know, you just, I don't know. I'm into Doom modding just because I still love that game, you know, and I play it, and I think it's an interesting and valuable design even today. But you kind of have to love that lo-fi stuff. I would kind of guess that Minecraft has made lo-fi 3D cooler. You know, I guess that's another thing. You know, like you know, Minecraft sort of completely confounding everybody's expectations for what a big successful game could be. But yeah, like if you want to get a job, if your objective is to get a job in the game industry, mod a modern game that you can make assets for, make levels for, and just learn about what it's like to create that kind of thing. Whereas, yeah, if you just want to make something weird, you know, or just a labor of love, or you're going the indie route, you know, because indie games can be low fidelity or look different, and that's totally cool. So, yeah, it's just sort of where you want to go with it.
This is more of a question for like id Software. Are you guys aware of like source ports like Skulltag? Do you guys follow any of those at all?
The question is are you aware of
source ports?
Source ports like Skulltag?
Yes. I personally don't know what Skulltag is, but in other cases, yeah, we know of you know, what people have done to the code, and some of it's pretty cool, and we like to follow that stuff.
In some cases, they've added on like complete new modes, like where there's like a survival mode where creatures will keep respawning, coming at you, kind of like they did in like Gears of War and stuff like that. Now that type of work, I would suspect, would be also good pieces to send in if you wanted that type of
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Follow up there for folks who might be watching streaming on the internet was about more substantial mods like survival modes and things like that, the importance of sending those things in for part of portfolio building and that kind of thing. Any other questions?
Thank you. I play a lot of Fallout New Vegas, and I do a little bit of modding for that. And all I can really do is like make like basic NPCs. I was wondering, what would be the best way to learn how to mod? Because I barely know. Would there be like, would you think like reading off of the internet or doing it yourself and figuring it out by yourself, or is there like a book out there?
Great question.
I don't know if there's any books. I haven't seen any. It's kind of a good idea, so I'm sure I can look up modding. But I mean, as always, the internet's pretty awesome. So I would go to the sites where people distribute mods. I would go to forums on those sites and talk on forums to people who are actually making mods. The other thing is just contact mod authors and ask them how they did stuff and where they got their information. It's kind of insane, but when I had the Zeus mod out, I was getting, I don't know, 100, 150 emails a day from people that were playing the mod, which I barely get that now, and I get way too many. But you know, I was always willing to answer questions for people like that, and to offer my help to people. And I think most mod authors would. So I would certainly go to the source of the people doing the stuff. And you can also email the developers. I mean, often we'll get questions from people, and I'm happy to help them when I can too.
Serious?
Brendan and JP, any further thoughts on that at all? How to get your start?
Yeah, like when I was making stuff back in the day, it was mainly just setting some goal for something I wanted to do, and then just doing. I mean, modding is kind of seems like this fun thing to do, but a lot of it is just like doing just research work into like, how does this work? How does this engine work? What is it good at? What is it bad at? You know, scouring forums for hours, trying to find some stupid detail on how to implement some tiny thing. So just, you know, hone up on your Google skills, basically.
Are you aware of any community blogs or threads are particularly good for finding these sorts of things? Anywhere you can refer people to?
The Quake editing sites I used to visit are all dead now.
Yes. You know, one other thing that's good to do there is look at the original maps in the game and the original content, and just try to figure out how something was done. If you want to do something similar, the best way to figure that out, the best example of that is always going to be how the developer did it. So there's a lot to be learned, and that's generally how all modders start at some point. Is going through what's there, what was released, and then figuring out how it was done by the developer.
I think there's a second question over here.
Okay, so I got here about 15 minutes late, so I apologize if you all have already discussed this, but a lot of players have noticed a correlation between the rise of paid DLC and a decrease in the amount of tools that people have. I guess an often cited example is Call of Duty World at War was the last PC release that included mod tools. The very next release, I forgot what it was exactly. The very next release did not include mod tools, but it had paid DLC. And so the question is there less of an incentive for developers to include mod tools when they are considered paid DLC? Is that part of the reason why we're seeing less tools?
The question was, is there less incentive to make it easier for people to mod when there's DLC being released for games? Is that generally the question? I would say that never enters into our minds. DLC makes it harder on the developers because we just have more to do. So as soon as the game's finished, we got to start making more content. We also have to support, on the platform, the consoles, we have to support, the official paths for installing and downloading DLC and making that work. It's just a lot more work for us, and I think probably in general that makes it harder for developers to support modding because we have a limited amount of time. I don't think there's any advantage, and I haven't talked to anybody who would think there's any advantage to we're not thinking of it as, because people are going to be playing mods, they're going to play our DLC. Maybe somebody somewhere in a marketing office thinks that. I don't know. I've never heard that opinion before. For us, I think it's mods are cool. Mods get more people interested in playing the game. You can't play the game without buying the mod without buying the original game anyway, and that's always a win for us. So I think there's probably some association there, perhaps, with the DLC making less tools come out. But I would say that's probably just strain on the developers.
Okay. With that, I think that's all the time we have for this panel, but I want to thank all three of you for being here and providing some great expert advice to the audience. And thank you all as well for sticking around and listening, and hope you had a great Quakecon. Thank you very much, guys.